everyone, and welcome to the Keeping Friendship Magic podcast, the podcast that takes a look at all things fandom and pop culture through the lens of social science and experience to hopefully build a better tomorrow. I am your host, Forward Progress, and joined with me, as always, is the lovely and talented Miss Nova Rose.
Howdy, howdy.
Today, we've got two fine gentlemen with us to discuss our topic of the day.
First, two disgusting gentlemen.
Yes, indeed. So, since you spoke up, we'll first introduce, welcome back to the podcast show here, Kermit the Grog. Thank you for joining us again.
Hi, I'm back. I'm very excited. We have talked about talking about this topic for a long time, so...
Indeed.
With that, let us invite in and introduce
all right.
our other co-hosts.
And we are also joined today by another returning guest, the thespian extraordinaire, writer, director, you name it, he does it, Mr. Josh Dorsheimer. Welcome back to Keeping Friendship Magic.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and good afternoon, evening, whatever it is, everyone. I'm very excited and also determined to talk about this subject matter.
Indeed. So you're all probably wondering out there, what is this subject matter they keep dancing around here? So basically what we're going to be discussing today is the concept of creator versus creation, art versus artist, and what happens when somebody creates a fantastic work of art, but maybe isn't the greatest person in the world. We've had lots of examples of it recently here.
Ooh, we sure have.
I don't want to live on this planet anymore.
we could make a list. I'm not going to make a list. I'm sure we're going to end up bringing up specific topics throughout, but I'm going to open this up with a general question to everybody here. And especially, I think this year, 2020, is very much a hotbed for this topic. But it's not like it's the first time that this has been a debate, even within our own lives. We've seen things happen. So I'll just ask this as a general question to start off of, do you find yourself at a crossroads, or have you found yourself at that crossroads where you really have a tough time figuring out how to, or whether to, separate the art versus the artist?
I know for me, at least, it's pretty clear cut. If the artist makes a fool of themselves and they're still benefiting from the art, I unfortunately, I cannot support that art. But if they have been, either cashed out or just not involved with it anymore, then I'll gladly consume that piece of art again. But until then, I don't want anything to do with it.
You used a really general term of just act a fool. I assume, obviously...
fool!
But I assume...
DMX.
Up in here. Okay, so, but... obviously, it's going to be more specific than in general act of fool, because that can have so many different connotations.
Well, I know, lately there's been way too many transphobic people, and I don't know if it's our current political climate where people are feeling more comfortable being transphobic.
I'm going to hazard a guess yes.
Sure,
a very strong hazard.
Yeah.
And I think that's a subject we'll definitely touch upon even further here. But before we dive too deep into that minefield, Seinfeld's older brother. I'll open that question up to the two of you about just in general those feelings of being at the crossroads, or whether or not you've had that struggle.
I've definitely come across it in a wide variety of places and contexts, and each one and each new space is hurts and is a challenge in different ways of, singular creators to creators that are ahead of a team, and how much does anything, get how much influence do they have on it? Like when you go, hey, this author had these kind of toxic, beliefs and stuff. Did that seep into their work? Is that somewhere there, even if you read it all? There's always, you play a lot of, at least I guess I play a lot of trying to figure out was this okay? Is this toxic? Do you cut this out? Can you salvage this? And time kind of plays into that as well. And yeah, no, I've definitely been in that boat.
piggybacking, I've also been in the same boat. I have a interesting view on it in general, just because I always try to give people the benefit of the doubt at first, because I think that morality is relative. And I think we all exist in some sort of a gray area. So I always be like, okay, where is this coming from? And then if it gets too toxic, then it kind of, with me, it's okay, is it an individual work? Like, is it an author and an individual person? Or if the person is, say, just a singular actor coming from theater, and I do some film work as well, coming from like theater and film, if it's a singular actor or a director, then I also have to think about, well, who are the other people involved? And, I might not support this person, but do I want to support the art form as a whole because other people were involved in it? So that's
and that's a wonderful point, and I definitely have a few different topics I want to go in on that. And the first one that comes to mind happened, I want to say, just a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago now at this point, when ABC rebooted, well, not even rebooted, just brought back Roseanne after many years off the air. And it was a huge success. And I'll say, because I watched the original, I watched what they were doing with the new one. I thought it was going in a good direction. I thought it was real. I actually thought it was going in a very progressive direction, in fact. There were some wonderful, very progressive people working on it. I know Wanda Sykes was actually on the writer's staff. I want to say Whitney Cummings was involved in that as well. So some definite progressive voices. But then, as we all know, Roseanne took to Twitter. And
as one does.
Yes.
As one does.
And said something incredibly inappropriate. And
Ambien said something incredibly sorry.
She did say it's due to Ambien. Now, granted, some medications do lead you to say some crazy stuff.
Didn't South Park make fun of that?
Medication may cause bouts of racism, big-headedism, and
oh no, this is not a defense in any stretch of the imagination.
I know. I was just.
Oh, no, not at all.
I
was making a joke.
But
yes, I was piggybacking that joke.
Oh yeah, but absolutely. But that's but there was this period there where there was a real question of what do you do here, because this is the creator and star of this show that just got brought back, and within, I want to say, 24 to 48 hours of that tweet going out, ABC canceled the entire show, which would in effect not just be in, something about Roseanne herself, but every other actor on the series, all of the production team,
and yes,
the writing staff, just think about that domino effect trickling down here. Now, this is an interesting case, because what they did was they did buy out Roseanne from the rights to those characters, and then rebranded it as the Connors, and had her pass away in the first episode of the Connors, which lasted a couple seasons. So they managed to find a way to work around that. So let me posit this to everybody. Is that something that could be a model to base off of, or is that too simple to say?
I mean, she was bought out. She's not really profiting from it anymore. I'm fine. And everyone actually were able to keep their jobs, so I think that was probably like the best case scenario right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely, I was actually very surprised, not that I'm giving her any credit. I honestly think Roseanne's not well, so I don't really want to, I mean, obviously what she said wasn't great at all, and I don't support her at all, but I do think that she's unwell, breeding some of the stuff. But I was honestly very surprised when she was like, yeah, here, buy it. And then I was like, oh, well, that worked out pretty well. Like, I remember being like, okay, I can sit down and watch this show and not feel kind of sick.
it's interesting too, because the other side to this coin, I feel, is a matter of I've talked about this before, that we are not perfect beings and we're going to screw up.
Correct.
So
And
at what point, what is the thing that says this is over, or that person needs to be kind of removed? Where does that line get drawn?
and I feel I was actually going to talk about this then. This actually leads it up really well of like even it what she said was bad. I don't think she'd be a part of it, but the speed that it moved at, and we've seen that with other people with canceling and over parties of like I always remember like tweets from like a long time ago from James Gunn getting him taken off Guardians of the Galaxy for a time, and some other even similar ones where people dredge up like old stuff because the internet never forgets.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of how we deal with that. Can people change? Do you judge them on those old things even though they could have gotten better? And like that was a case where those old things got dredged up from a long time ago. He got punished for it in the moment, and everybody was like, no, he's not that person anymore, like reinstate him. And people did, because everybody who worked with him said he was such a great guy. And admittedly, in this case, it's just he said maybe some not great things on Twitter a long time ago, and not like he had a sexual assault or a rape or something more actual and terrible. And I feel like that also plays into it, this sliding scale of what was the awful thing that happened.
Well, I know, like it's interesting because I know, what was it? Like Liam Neeson, I know way back in the day, like he was a massive racist, and people started dredging that up. Like now, and it was like that was like back when that was, I guess, more like socially acceptable in air quotes. But like,
those are some honking air quotes, but
but like now it's just like he's just like, yeah, it was completely wrong. Like I think as long as you learned from back then it's like I don't know if we can really condemn them as long as they kind of learned from it.
But what if it wasn't just an ideological thing? Like what if it, like kind of I was saying, it's like when and maybe this is a thing we're gonna have to figure out as we kind of like more and more time passes from us kind of weeding out a lot of these people, of just like if it was like a physical like crime thing that happened, can you go, this person has changed, and forgive them if they never got punished for it the first time? And kind of dealing with that, it's like, oh, you did an awful thing, but you did it a long time ago and you were never punished for it then, so you're better now, but you still technically got away with this thing that's awful. And like trying to come to terms with that. I'm trying to think of a particular example of somebody who like specifically turned around since then, but
he didn't really turn around.
I mean, I know a lot of people who have acted a fool and turned their lives around. I know, like, Robert Downey Jr. comes to mind. That now a lot of that was kind of more drug and alcohol related, and he went to rehab, got his life together, and I mean, look at him now.
I was just going to say, kind of going back to what you were saying about how do we know, like, how much was enough. See, again, bringing it back to the gray thing, when it comes to the culture on Twitter, I do think, I know people throw this around and then it's like, oh, don't say that because you're going to sound like you're a bigot. Sorry. I don't necessarily like the idea of this whole, you're able to cancel somebody for one thing that they might have done. I think that's very judge and jury and kind of pious, to be honest. So I don't like it. That being said, I think that, there are definitely some things that folks, like, you can have something, you can slip, people are human. Obviously, people are human. That's a very obvious thing.
Agreed.
But so everybody's gonna fuck up. Nobody is perfect. Nobody's squeaky clean. I could probably find 50 million things about my friends that I could quote cancel them for. However, I think what we saw kind of with Roseanne in that particular instance is that she was kind of like a repeat offender. Like, yeah, she said that really bad thing that they were like, no, we're going to cancel. But before she said that bad thing, she was saying things about like school shootings being a hoax. Like it was not one time. They gave her multiple chances. So I didn't think that one kind of came out of nowhere. I think it was like they were trying their best to like be understanding, and then it was like that's just what I saw. But then, there are other instances kind of like where Andrew brought up, it's like, oh, sometimes the thing is really big and you gotta like really think about that really big thing because, some sins, even though, let he who without sin, cast the first stone. Some sins are pretty big and they're not, they're not to be kind of brushed over. So
they have to be properly, not forgiven. What's the word I want? Kind of, I'm missing the word I want, but like work to be forgiven, of actually showing.
They have to show remorse. Yeah. Speaking of people who are, showing remorse and making amends, we've had a long history, and let's face it, a long history, especially in Hollywood, and we're finding out more and more about this today, of people who have gone just under the radar, never having to pay or show anything for what they've done. And there's a couple of big names that obviously come to mind, Weinstein being probably the most obvious here. But then you had somebody like Kevin Spacey as well, that somebody finally spoke out, and then after that one person spoke out, a lot of co-workers and people who were with him on projects were saying like, oh yeah, no, he was terrible with sexual harassment on set, and people had just accepted it for so long. So you have that issue, I think, that needs to get addressed right now, of there's the one side that says, yes, people can be forgiven, they can make amends, they can, grow. But then there's the other side that says, if we just keep giving them a slap on the wrist, nothing will change.
Well, it's you need more than a slap. Like, you need, like, a proper punishment, needs to be done to seek that forgiveness. If you're just going to kind of float over it, it doesn't, there's still kind of, like, I feel like a lot of these is the way I approach it. It's like, they're still kind of tainted in my brain. When I see Kevin Spacey in something, or, Bill Cosby or whatever, it's always there's always that little bit of like, ooh, like, oh, this isn't good. I'm kind of wincing a little bit thinking about it, because they're still they haven't done anything to kind of gain forgiveness, I guess, at least in, my brain as a viewer. They haven't properly taken on the fact that they committed a wrong and over time made genuine steps to make amends. Although
one thing that comes to my mind for some reason is the episode of Father of the Pride with Matt Lauer. That was somehow made infinitely better, almost, because of the context of the episode.
Well, the thing about that, you kind of got a little cringe.
Okay, yeah. What was it? I don't know that.
Okay, what is Matt Lauer was let go from the Today Show and pretty much all of NBC for, again, sexual harassment scandals. And it's great that we have the Me Too movement and things are being called out. It's been needed for so long. But there's Father of the Pride, by the way, was an animated series done by DreamWorks that NBC had. It only lived on for one season. It just sticks with me because I found it hilarious, and I showed Rose some of the episodes and forgot that Matt Lauer was actually in an episode animated, and just watching and listening to the lines they have him saying and such, and then knowing what has happened since, it's like you start cringing, because that's all you can think about now. Watching that media is you think about that. And it's the same thing that I have, like, I think Mel Gibson is a great actor and a fine director, but boy, does it difficult sometimes for me to watch him in film, because I know what he's done, what he has said, and just the hateful things towards groups of people that I call friends and that are just people. Because why do you need to put down a whole group of people? Why do you need to put down women? Why do you need to put down Jews? Why do you need to put down anybody? People are people. People are human, as we said earlier.
Yeah, with the Mel Gibson thing, he has never really kind of apologized for that. So he's never apologized for Hamlet either. So, but yeah, it's weird. Again, it's just to piggyback off of like seeing somebody. It does take me out of the moment when I see somebody who like I'm not. Michael Jackson is a good.
Yeah, he's more and more. It's just like, oh man, like I get really conflicted when I'm like, oh, I love this song, ooh, and trying to figure out how to categorize it in my brain.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big Vincent Price fan, and obviously I love Thriller because Vincent is a really big part of that, and I still listen to it because a lot of other people worked on that. John Landis worked on it. The makeup effects artist, I think it was Stan Winston, did the makeup for the music video. Vincent Price is in it, but Michael Jackson makes me feel real icky. So I totally get that. But then it's like, I guess I try to like ground myself in a way, but I know other people, and I'm not saying other people have to do that. That's just what I do, because I understand that maybe the feelings might be too strong for somebody to be like, no, I can't watch this because that person's in it. It makes me too upset. That's totally understandable. I have a thing where I'm just like, okay, I have to remember that other people worked on this, and I enjoy their work too. Sometimes it's harder though.
Yeah, that actually gets at something I was thinking about, that there's kind of at least like two major categorizations of people you're seeing on screen and people that were an important part of making the thing, or just it's a work they created. It's not something that would be, they would be seen visually in, it's like when you're watching, I mean, the thing I always think about with Kevin Spacey of like Baby Driver, it's like you see it and you just go, oh geez, but like something else like John Lasseter used to be head of animation for Disney and Pixar, of like, he's never in the movies, but it's like, it's something that I think about now when I think about Disney and Pixar and all of that, and him getting ousted and never really actually feeling bad or apologizing for what he did. And it's like, it's not just like, oh, I see a person, it's like, I know his mitts are in here somewhere. Like it's more of like a paranoia almost. And the extra step of that, if that person is still connected to the thing, it's like, do I spend money on this because even if other people worked on it, some part of this money will make it back to them. And it not just being I'm uncomfortable watching this, but like I'm uncomfortable giving money to this person, even if they're only like a part of who's getting paid from it.
Isn't that pretty much where everyone is right now with the new Harry Potter game?
I knew we were going to bring up the elephant in the room.
The magical elephant who lives under the stairs.
So, let's get into
Harry
it.
Pachyderm. That was terrible. Continue. The time released on that one.
It took a moment. Okay.
It wasn't even good. Okay, yes.
Okay. So, we all know what's happening.
But if we don't, just in case you're somehow unsure of this, or you're listening to this like a time capsule and we haven't thought about this person in a long time.
So J.K. Rowling, creator of Harry Potter, Joanne, yes, Joanne Rowling.
Joanne KKK Rowling. That was the joke we talked about beforehand. That's all I got.
Obviously creator of the book series Harry Potter that turned into one of the biggest pop culture franchises of our lifetime, and has made multiple statements against transgender people.
Over many years.
At this point, yes. And it's one of probably the most disheartening examples, because we've talked about individuals where they've had a history of, repeated wrongdoing and things where, like, what Josh mentioned earlier with Roseanne, where it's kind of one of those almost not a surprise. But
multiple opportunities to know better and failing to.
Mm-hmm. But leading up to the point where it started coming up, J.K. Rowling was known for, like, donating to good causes and supporting all these different things. And she was definitely known for feminism work. But then she got exclusionary with her feminism, and it's taken on a much darker tone. And it's interesting now because what's happening is, and I don't know how many people have seen this, but recently there were several other creative peoples who got together and all wrote her some kind of letter of support. And those people's names and such have been kind of coming out. And a lot of them are just saying, yes, I support her. But now it's getting interesting because now it's getting into this domino of, like, are you a bad person too?
I think if anyone supports her views, then they are a bad person in my eyes. Because anyone that is for, like, essentially taking away the rights of trans people can just... Bad words. all of the bad words to those people.
And that's and that's such a thing right now. And I think the big thing here, and we've been dancing around this, is J.K. Rowling is a woman. Joanne has a platform. To be blunt, she does.
No, she does. Yes.
She has, she's got the money for it. She's got people listening. And
people who if they don't know better, respect her because they wrote the books they read when they were kids and growing up.
Well, and that's the thing is when she says something anymore, whatever she's saying is a news story. It was almost unbelievable when I was reading those headlines about what was contained in the new book. And I'm just gonna...
Seems very clear that her beliefs are definitely 100% leaking into her work now.
Oh, absolutely.
In that regard of the troublesome thing, and I feel like that's part of that fits well into our thing of, can you separate art from artist if you can assure yourself that those, things that you don't agree with, those toxic beliefs, are in the piece of work that you enjoy.
And so now, let me ask. I'll ask this of everybody because I never really got into Harry Potter like a lot of other people do. Did anybody here really kind of absorb it and get into it?
I did.
I mean, I read it, but I wasn't like, I didn't finish reading through them as they were coming out. I kind of fell out because of my hipster brain.
Well, no, I read all the books. I saw all the movies. I wanted to go watch the Fantastic Beasts movies, but never really did. But it's just like, now I kind of have no interest. But I know some people...
I definitely... Sorry.
I was just
Go
saying...
ahead, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Cheers. It's yours, Russ. Take it.
I was just saying, like, I know some people really, like, it became, like, part of their life. But I never got that far into it.
I was a big Harry Potter head in high school, but not so much as an adult. I mean, I enjoy the films mostly because there are a lot of distinguished English actors that I really like in the films. But it's not something that I'm like hardcore into anymore.
Do you think now, like Harry Potter, I mean, Forward, you had said it earlier, it's like it's one of the biggest new pop culture things of the generation. Do you think this will kind of take the wind out of its sails, or take out its longevity? Because it's always going to have this now. The whole generation not whole, but a large portion of them are now kind of like, and it makes it, even if it's not necessarily directly connected, it makes the whole thing, it gives it a certain sort of stink to it, where it's like,
it's hard to say. It's really hard to say. Definitely won't be as strong, but there is and we're gonna transition a little into the science end of things here, but there is a separation in a lot of people's minds. When you consume media, you have the reality behind creating that media, and then there's the media itself. And that media itself kind of creates a little spot in your brain separate from the rest of it. Now, it's possible, obviously, for all of us to kind of get in there, and that's where things go, where the more you kind of open up to some of the reality and the horrible things, the more you get the crossover and such. But there's always probably going to be people who are going to separate Harry Potter from J.K. Rowling as much as it literally was her work.
I know one thing I could definitely say with this, especially like J.K. Rowling is the author of these books, so if we're going to have any more Harry Potter books, it would basically require her to write more books. But I kind of think upon, if anyone's familiar with Atlas Games, where they obviously have a very anti-trans viewpoint, and it has seeped into those games. I used to really enjoy Catherine, but now that...
Oh, Atlas,
yeah. Where it's now that I've actually I came out as trans and now have replayed Catherine, I'm like, holy cow, this game's actually really transphobic.
Oh my gosh, we could probably do an entire episode on that within other cultures, because when you play a lot of games and watch a lot of anime from Japan, and just I feel like I give them a little bit more of a cringing pass of you guys should know better, but it's not my culture, and but it's this is how you've been so backwards on all this stuff that it's just sort of you build up a tolerance to it.
It does,
but it's ugh, this is... You guys got to get better at this, people.
It does make me happy that the American localization team were actually very uncomfortable with how they portrayed it and tried their best to make it more approachable. But I guess my point being is that type of thing, especially with subtlety, is dangerous, because new people playing games, or young, the youth can play that and then start to essentially develop those viewpoints. And I feel like that can be really dangerous, especially for a woman that writes novels for children.
Oh, indeed.
Yeah.
Although the new novel is definitely not a children's novel.
Thank goodness, but that is what I fear for the longevity of Harry Potter.
I can I guess it kind of going along with it. I think the novels themselves, and the novels moving forward, if she does any more, they have been a little tainted for me because they're coming directly from the author. And now it's oh, I don't know if I can go back and read the books. Not that I read, because I have ADD, but I did it once, and that thing, even if she wasn't transphobic, it would be torture to probably try to read them again. But it's harder, I think, personally for me, when it's coming directly from the source, if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes absolute sense.
Yes.
With film... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to essentially agree with your statement. It's, the less people involved, that the purer that is coming from the person, and the more it gets tainted if that person gets tainted.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly given her wonderful new works that she's writing. But when it comes to the films, I feel like I could still probably, if I wanted to, be okay with watching the film, because we're talking about, you brought up the idea of when does it kind of leave the author's hands and become its own entity. Well, in theater, you're sorry that I'm bringing it back to theater, but that's kind of my go-to. In theater, you take people's words and music and whatever all the time, and somebody new, as well as a new group of people, interpret that work, and it's a totally different thing. So like, and then you get that when people go to see like the Harry Potter movies, they're like, oh well, I didn't imagine it this way. That's because you're not the one who did it. It was this particular filmmaker. So I feel like I can go and still watch the movies and be kind of okay with it, because yeah, it was written by J.K. Rowling, but really, the first two movies, that belongs to Chris Columbus. He had the vision, not the one that stole the land. The director, Chris Columbus.
Thank you for the clarification. I was very unsure.
Well, just in case.
In the year of 1492, Chris Columbus directed Harry Potter 2.
That's what we'll be teaching school-age children now.
In the chamber, the chamber, the secrets,
chamber pot,
and
secrets.
I don't know enough of the spells to make a Santa Maria joke.
The Phoenix? I don't know.
That's the Pilgrims.
We're okay. Anyway.
But,
yes.
Oh, that's okay. I mean, but then you also have like the screenwriters who took her words and reinterpreted the characters for film. With the video game, I hear that she kind of has more of a hand in the writing with that, she directly profits off of it, which that makes me feel a little squicky. I don't think I would be down for that.
But did she not have it on the films as well, or no?
And
that's where it's like, what's the level of separation? And that's the part where I kind of go like, oh, I don't know, and my guts hurt. It's complicated.
Well, that's true. I mean, she could still be getting residuals from the films. I bet she is. But that's kind of in the past. The game is coming out now, so it's a little different.
True.
And then also, other people are getting paid. I guess other people are getting paid for the game too, though. So I don't know. That's tough.
There's been a lot of discussion about the game and who makes profit and such. And there hasn't been any direct statement about J.K. Rowling monetarily, whether she's already been paid out and it's done, or whether she gets residuals. I haven't seen anything to that extent yet. But I think that's the thing that I'm looking at now is this the direction we're going now? Is this something we're going to almost demand as a culture? Are we going to demand to know what stake people have in things in the event that they have to be canceled? Is that where we're going as a society?
To know it at the top, or to just know it at all? Because I feel like knowing going in feels weird, but it's just being able to know afterwards so you can adjust how you feel about it would be nice. Like,
and I guess that's the thing, though, is do we create the precedent that that's acceptable now? And under what circumstances? And I'm not, these are just questions to posit about where we're going as a society. And it's not a judgment of a positive or negative necessarily, but there's definitely waves happening and they need to happen. But it's a matter of, do we let the waves just happen and then go back to status quo? Or when now the waves have happened, what do we change? What do we alter, and how do we do it such that we're not running into these scenarios in the same manner? Granted, it's going to be different situations are going to be different levels, because you're always going to have people who have misguided viewpoints, who have, who are going to say or do something that we don't like. But then so you have that on the one side. You also have the other side where those people who we found out, did these horrible things of, the sexual harassment, the rape, all of these things that needs to get shut down. And all of this obviously needs to go down, but we can only prevent so much. And what do we do as a culture to at least start moving us in the better direction?
I think if you have a history of being a hateful bigot, make steps to get better. Like stop hating people. Like maybe
take steps to not.
Yeah, exactly. It's like as long as you make and put forth the effort to see other people's viewpoints and try to love thy neighbor, then I think we would be in a lot better situation than we are now. Like I kind of think back on, what was it, the one guy from Survivor. It's like he did a really bad thing of you can explain.
Okay. So a few seasons ago on Survivor, they had a season where one of the characters on it was
one of the people. They are not characters.
I was gonna say.
This is not a. I know it's not a scripted written show. There might be written bits, but yeah, these are actual human beings on an island.
One of the individuals that was competing on that season was a transgender male, but no one knew. He was not out about it, and somebody who up until that point had kind of been, friendly to him and this and that, outed him at tribal council, and essentially to millions of viewers, including all of his family and friends, of course. So in that instance, what happened is everything changed, and they didn't even go to vote in that episode. They all just unanimously said he's gone for what he just did, and they had him leave. And I think it might have been the only time, other than somebody quitting the game, that they did not have a vote.
Crazy.
But that was an immediate. Wow. It was an immediate action. He accepted it. By the time they had the reunion special, he had actually done things, taken steps, made amends with the guy, and had done some charity work to kind of, to do something to give back, because he knew what he did was terrible. And I believe he even said something to the extent of like, I don't expect everybody to forgive me right away, but I feel terrible. I'm working towards it. And I guess that's what we always want to see. Granted, sometimes it's more truthful and spirited and real remorse than others.
Yeah, remorse.
And it's tough sometimes because you feel like you can tell, but it's not always the easiest to tell.
And I think that's like, as far as the cancel culture right now, like, there's no point in trying to cancel someone that has already learned from their mistake and has done better since. Like, I think that's stupid. Like, going after Liam Neeson would kind of be stupid, because it's like, that was freaking 50 years ago. People change in that amount of time.
One of the biggest things that I've taken in and of myself, when I started working on this project, and I went, hey, I'm going to start speaking to groups of people and talking about stuff. And I was thinking about the fact of, like, eyes are going to be on me. And I made a decision very early on to be like, you know what? My life is an open book, and I'm going to talk about it because I've screwed up plenty, but I've also learned from it. And that's the most important thing, is learning from your mistakes and being willing to say, I was wrong. That is a huge thing to be able to say and believe.
Absolutely.
And know.
Agreed.
And I think that's one of the bravest things a person can do, is admit that they were wrong and that they want to change. That takes a lot for a person to do, because it kind of goes against what your brain naturally wants to think, which is, I'm right all the time. It's a preservation of self-esteem thing, where it's your brain's always being like, I'm right, and I'm rejecting these other realities. But sometimes you have to listen to it, and that's how we make a society stronger.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. And piggybacking off of that with the other realities thing, I'm not saying that people who, say bad, like, things that are not good, or do things to hurt people, shouldn't be, that behavior shouldn't be addressed, that they, shouldn't get in trouble if it's, if trouble is needed. But I think it's also really, like, I try to sometimes, I can't say that I'm 100% great about it all the time, but like, if it's somebody I hear, oh, so-and-so did this, before jumping on the whole bandwagon of, oh my goodness, this person is canceled, it's not that I necessarily don't want to believe somebody, but things go out on the internet. It's also, I like to go and look up context too, because something can still be bad, but you can also. I have a very specific example here.
Go for it.
So maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. So I'll bring it up later.
No, okay.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
we're good. If
Go
you want to
for it now.
dive in now, go ahead.
Yeah, now's the time.
Well, I mean, you had mentioned before, as when we were prepping for this, that there was another particular
Yes.
scenario
Yes.
about a piece and a creator, and I have kind of a complicated view on it.
Mhm.
The
do you
floor is
wanna
yours.
Do you want to bring it up though forward?
Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
To give context.
So
Sure.
okay, so we've actually been talking about doing this episode for probably almost 2 months now. And when we first started talking about it, one of the things that spawned it was I stumbled upon an article from the creator of Rocky Horror. It's Richard O'Brien, am I correct on that?
Yes, they
Okay.
still go by Richard, but I don't know what pronouns they use, to be honest.
I think they're non-binary. If
well,
I'm
they're
not mistaken.
gender fluid, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they're definitely gender fluid. So to be safe, I've been referring to them as they.
Yeah.
So
I've actually read a couple articles since then, but that's actually kind of my point of where I want to get to with this. Is I read this article that basically said that he had said some negative things about transgender people, very similar to what J.K. Rowling had said, basically saying they weren't real women and things along those lines. And it seemed to be going down this whole body mutilation path that is being touted. That is, I can't even. I'll say this to anybody who's out there. Going through every step of the transition with Rose here, like, I can't express fully how much respect and love I have for anybody who knows who they are enough to go through all of this to be themselves. And to challenge that in these manners is unbelievable to me. I really think that the bravest thing a person can do is be themselves, and I've never been more proud of somebody than I am of Rose right here. And I don't just say that because she's right here next to me, but going back to the main point here is, now we got talking about Rocky Horror and in a lot of different ways, and I'm like, okay, this is definitely an interesting topic to bring up because this can go in multiple different ways. Now, since then, I've actually, even earlier tonight in preparation for doing this episode, I read a little more context on it that kind of brings it into a little more full light, in my opinion, but I'll let Josh continue where you want to go with it here.
Sure. Well, first of all, I have opinions about Rocky Horror the piece itself, but we're not going to get into that. That's a different podcast. I like it, but I think it has some problems. But I read that article too, the initial one that was like, "Hey, Richard O'Brien said some transphobic stuff," and I was like, really? Richard O'Brien? Richard, I'm not male, I'm not female O'Brien? This is very strange to me. And then I read the comment that, like, the quote that was in the article, and I was like, oof. So then I kind of looked into the context. I don't have the direct quote here, and I apologize. And even my thing with it was, it didn't necessarily make it better for me, what they said. In the context of the article, basically it was Richard O'Brien saying, I don't think trans women are women. I think they're trans women. And that was like where the first quote was kind of cut off. But then when I went back and read further into the article and then they clarified themselves, they added, and that is perfectly okay. I think that that's beautiful. I think you should embrace your difference, kind of thing. Like that they are embracing being something different. And while I don't necessarily agree with those comments, like personally, first of all, in the context that Richard O'Brien identifies as gender fluid, and also the fact that it's an opinion about embracing who you are, I can disagree with the comment, but I can't, I guess, disagree with the sentiment that where it's coming from, because I feel like I can't tell a queer person what their view should be on queerness. Does that make any sense?
It does. Go ahead, Rose.
It's one of those things of like something that I've noticed a lot of people say is how like I didn't choose to be trans, and I'm not trying to fool myself or other people that I am a woman. It's just like it's just the reality, and it bothers me when people try to say otherwise.
So when I went back and I did a little more research today, and it seemed a lot of what Richard O'Brien was talking about seemed to very much be focused on how they feel about themselves. But then it went into a context that very much made it seem about everybody. But the crux of it was him talking about how he feels about himself, that he wouldn't feel like a real woman if he went and got the surgery. And, you know, and that's a whole conversation. And that's a future episode of talking about a lot of those things, because whether or not you get the surgery is an individual choice and does not make you any more or less trans or the gender you associate with.
Also how you feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, having like read all those quotes, like I think the biggest and most prevalent thing is he doesn't know how like trans people work, like who or what they are. Like he's ignorant about the subject, and he's trying to go give an opinion of something he's ignorant about, which is never a great thing.
Well, and that's the thing, though, was I realized that I read 2 articles earlier today. One was from 2016 and one was from 2019. And the 2019 one seemed much more progressive, I'll say, towards the topic.
Wait, did you just say progressive or aggressive?
No, progressive.
Okay, thank you.
Of maybe stepping in the right direction of understanding somewhat. I don't know, and I'm not going to pretend to know the absolute behind them. And I'm also not going to defend anything, because let's just put it that way. Let's just say this. A transgender woman is a woman. A transgender man is a man. Yeah. Gender was a construct. Yes. Gender is a social construct that we act out on a daily basis, and you know internally where you identify. Regardless of whether or not your genitals show it, you know. And it's a reality. I'm just going to say that because it's just the truth. Now, that being said, obviously, it's hard for some people to understand. And it's... I'm not going to lie. Like, for me, you know, as somebody who has been a confident, cisgender gay man for his entire life, to suddenly get into a relationship with a transgender person that's transitioning into being a woman was very much a different thing for me. And I had to really take stock in, can I do this? Is this what I really want? Am I okay with this? And it, you know, and I had to kind of parcel that out. And at the end of the day, it really is boiled down to, I mean, we've been together 3.5 years now. Almost exactly, actually. Mm-hmm. I think just a little bit under. And obviously, I'm in this. I mean, we're engaged.
In it to win it.
I'm in it to win it, yeah. But for me, as I've gotten, and this is something I've noticed as I've gotten older too, is that I feel that as I get older, my once more rigid concepts on sexuality and gender, it isn't as big of a deal to me of what that is. It doesn't have to be this or that. It can be a blend. It can be something that I can never fully comprehend myself within other people, but they can, and I can accept that. And I think that's maybe the biggest plateau that we're hoping for people to get to, is that place where I don't understand it, but that's okay. I accept it. I accept you for who you are.
Good stuff.
I wish there was a way to clap through audio. I mean, I guess I could, but that was very well. That was very well.
Oh, he muted. That was very well done. I'll finish his sentence for them. I hope that's what he was trying to say.
Thank you.
No, I think that's a good point. I feel like we started in one important topic and found our way into another very important topic.
Well, I mean, it all ties together here, because this is the other piece of this is where we're trying to encourage everyone in that direction, in a sense. And we don't want to force people and tell them this is how you have to think. But there's also a difference. There's been some great memes and such that have been around lately of
the great memes of our time. Like
yes.
A scholar reading from the Daily News.
I've talked about studying meme culture more in depth. So.
I love meme culture. I'm the last person to say ill of it, but it's just the tone you took made me think very like Greek scholar. It made me laugh.
I was gonna say I'll host Masterpiece Theater on memes after this. Yes. Okay.
Memester-piece theater.
Memester-piece theater. I love it.
Meme theater. Continue.
Okay. Anyway, so, but there was some interesting things about. Yes, we can differ in opinion on how tax money should be spent, or how to pave our roads, but differing on who has equal rights is not a difference.
Human rights.
Yeah. That's not a difference of opinion. And that's a big one right now. And I think that's the thing, that the core of all of this that we're trying to reach out to have an understanding is we're not telling people how that they need to think about everything. We just want everybody to respect everybody else's right to exist and have the same rights and not be looked down upon.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And that's what we want from these people. And when we don't get it, that's what's causing the problem of the art versus artist. I had a conversation with Thoth Penswell, good friend of the show here, and the other day talking about this topic. And I was saying about how you look at pieces of art and media and fiction of somebody who's passed on that was problematic, and I feel like that it's different to look at that. It's so much easier for me to look at that than it is for me to look at somebody who's still alive and kicking and producing further art. And somebody like and I'll just H.P. Lovecraft is an example.
Oof, yeah, that's a take.
Mark
yes.
Twain.
Although Mark Twain did write progressive works, though.
True.
But that's the other thing, though, is we always talk about of their time.
Yeah.
And it's easy to say that, but now we can't, somebody who's producing art today for the future, they don't have that ability. We don't have that ability to say that because they're actively doing it. And we're trying to wrap things in that context of you can be better.
Yeah, like when it comes to older art, I'm a little bit, first of all, I'm a little bit more forgiving because, yes, looking at it now, things are wrong. But, it was everybody goes through a growing period. Every single human being goes through a growing period. The world goes through a growing period too. I don't think it's so much personally with me focusing on some of that stuff that was created. I mean, unless it's like incredibly problematic, Birth of a Nation. I don't, say to my buddies, hey, let's sit down and watch Birth of a Nation. But as far as moving forward, I absolutely forward progress, as it were. I think, as far as creating new content, we can kind of look at where we were and take those steps to go forward. I don't necessarily do the whole looking back unless, it's necessarily one very, very problematic, if that makes sense.
See, I feel like works where, they're long dead or whatever, like, they almost serve as a time capsule. And I feel like, so, like, now in J.K. Rowling's case, it's like, this is a person that can actively do better because she's still alive. So it's like, my whole shtick is, like, I like seeing people to do better. Like, and, like, that's why, like, I like people being more progressive, but...
I think... go ahead.
Also, some things age poorly than others.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always interesting to go back and see, oh, wait a minute, our values changed than what we thought was progressive then comparative to now. And I always think and theorize, it's like, well, what are we making now that we think so forward that they're going to find that, a decade from now, people are going to find, oh, wait a minute, we shouldn't have been doing XYZ.
I think the thing that I came across as a conclusion of when I'm looking at works of the past, particularly something where that individual has passed on, is that they're no longer profiting or benefiting from it. It's reached a point where it's just the work. And therefore, I can separate the work from the individual and look at it in its own context. And it's so much harder to do when that person is still here and given a voice, given in making an impact, and a lot of times not for the good.
The one thing I find interesting is I recently read a book that was from the 70s, and like I was just reading it. I'm like, this is a book that was written in the 70s. Like, this is something that seems like would be written now, because it's like it's super like feminists. Like, there's transgender character in it, and they're portrayed well, and actually like that they did like research on like how like transgender people work. So it's like major kudos to them. But it's like, this is a book made in the 70s.
You can find progressive works throughout history.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff we don't think about it as that because there's so much other media that isn't, and that stuff like that got stamped. Like, people were like that. I always think back of like, I was really impressed rewatching MASH with my family that there's an episode where there's a gay soldier, and they specifically make a point of someone who's being a homophobe, like he needs like a blood transfusion, and he's the soldier that gives it. And like the most of the cast kind of admonishes this guy for like acting weird about it.
This is gonna sound random to anybody who really didn't watch the series, but you know what one of the most progressive series that I saw of the last 30 or so years was, that really took its position, 30 to 40 years, I'd say, that took the fact that it was a popular show and ran with and did progressive storylines for the time, was the Golden Girls.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I always hear that. Yeah,
Golden Girls had
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, plenty of episodes. They dealt with homophobia, they dealt with sexism, they dealt with ageism, they dealt with immigration, even
HIV. They dealt with HIV.
Mm-hmm. And
on the flip side, sorry, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, but that's those works are out there, and it's fantastic. And that's the thing, I think, that kind of bringing this around, so to speak, is I think that's what we're trying to see more of and hoping to see, is there's so many great works, and we'd probably rather be supporting those great progressive works than seeing our hard-earned money go towards somebody who isn't going to share in that progressive future.
I can get behind that. Can I add something really quick to go along with what we were also talking about like context and like when things were created?
Absolutely.
Golden Girls when it came out was incredibly progressive. It still is by a lot of our standards, but it's interesting because Golden Girls is still from the 80s, and there still have been episodes that have come under fire for not being so progressive, actually, recently. and it's just part of that growing period. That was seen as a very progressive show, and it still is. I think, again, just to tie it back with my point about growing, you know, you see the really great progressive stuff that is in Golden Girls, we can embrace it and then kind of see where they weren't so progressive and can improve upon that, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. I think that's kind of the final point I want to reach with all of this, with everything that we've discussed, is there's art and media that exists out there. Some of it is by problematic people. Some of it's in the past. Some of it's now. We can't change what has been brought into existence. But what we can do is make steps towards a better tomorrow and continue that as a people. And I think that includes holding people accountable when they do something wrong, but also allowing for the opportunity for somebody who was wrong to learn a lesson and become something better. And I think that's the ultimate goal we're looking for here.
Agreed. I believe that's a tune we can all dance to.
All right.
Agreed.
So we're definitely right around time right now. So I do want to thank everybody here for joining us. Just open it up if there's anything anybody wants to leave as one last word on the topic before we wrap up.
Stop being...
Rose?
Oh, I was just gonna say, stop being dicks to each other, y'all.
Yeah, listen to people how they feel. My little ending tag for all y'all listeners to chew on as we leave, in the way that times have changed. Of that, like, remember when PB Herman got busted in that porn theater for jacking off, and then how, like, not an actual problem that was in view of all the awful things we learned about people now. So I don't know what direction to think about that, but just think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I'll leave with a Mr. Rogers quote that I enjoy. It's more of a song, but it kind of goes in. First of all, he has a song where he's like, you're growing in and out, you're growing all about. And also he has that song, sometimes people are good, but the very same people who are good sometimes are the very same people who are bad sometimes. And I think it's great because it helps reflect, particularly when you're trying to learn and grow and create content that is accessible and loving to all people. So,
absolutely. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining. Thank you, Miss Nova Rose, for coming along on the ride again.
Always.
And thank you to our special guest. Thank you, Mr. Kermit the Grog.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure. And thank you for returning, Josh. It was great to have you again.
Thank you for having me, but don't you dare let this happen again. I'm just kidding. I love you. Thank you.
Consider your name stricken from the list of future guests.
Oh, I love you guys. But with that said, I want to thank all of our listeners. You guys are the best. Thank you for taking this in. And as always, remember to keep friendship magic out there. Have a good one.